Garutara Sangaratne Avasarai, and let me warmly welcome Reverend Bhikkhuni Kema Sasana Deepika, meditation teacher, Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation, Team Secretary for Most Venerable Bhante Vimalasari Mahathera, and the co-founder and the chairwoman of United International Buddha Dharma Society USA. Then we have also with us Professor Dr. Anne Cato, Department of Neuroscience, Faculty of Medicine, University of Geneva, Switzerland. And we have with us Professor Dr. Gabo Cato, formerly the Department of Pharmacology, McGill University, Montreal, Canada, but presently the CEO of the Neurotech SA, Geneva, Switzerland. And I would like to welcome everybody, both the university and the public who have attended this meeting. So on behalf of the World Class University Project and the University of Sri Jawadanapura, I cordially welcome you to this exceptional guest lecture on meditation and mindfulness to be exposed by Professor Anne Cato from Switzerland and Reverend Bhikkhuni Kema from United States on. So there will be two talks, one actually on the Buddhist aspect by Bhikkhuni Kema, which is titled Buddha's Investigation into Samatha Vipassana. That will be for half an hour. And then of course we would like Professor Cato to show us how the Buddhist, the mindfulness, meditation links to medicine. And that will be the second talk. And these transparent PowerPoint presentations will be, Professor Cato's will be, one screen will be in English, one screen, the slides will be in Sinhalese. So anybody who finds it difficult, we will have a summary in Sinhalese in Professor Cato's, which I would do it. And then Bhikkhuni lecture from the Mr. Sanjeeva, from the Soft Skill Development Unit of the Faculty of Humanitarian, from the Faculty of Arts, that is University of Sri Jawadanapura, will give a summary of Sister Kema. So therefore, I mean, it will be not a complete translation because the time lapse, there is a time problem. So it will be more or less a summary we would give to you in Sinhalese. So I would like now cordially invite Reverend Bhikkhuni Kema Deepika for half an hour lecture on meditation, on Buddha's investigation into Samatha Vipassana.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to give this talk. It's a real pleasure for me to be here in the Buddhist Studies Department, and also the Venerables. Thank you. And I hope that this doesn't take you up too much. I had a very short presentation done last night, and the computer decided to make it disappear. So here we are. So we're going to go through this rather quickly. But this is about Buddhist meditation and the birth of cognitive science. The question is, did the Buddha practice a Samatha Vipassana practice to uncover his truths? At the beginning, the Buddha only held one job in his whole lifetime. He was a master meditation teacher. But when the Buddha went into meditation, he went there to investigate how the suffering works. Our suffering happens because we lack an understanding of the true nature of our existence. We probably all agree that human beings do not understand the full potential of mind. That's why we're here. We're doing research into this. In Buddhism, to a large extent, it is the knowledge that sets us free. It is the knowledge of how things work that relieves our suffering and reveals an untapped potential of mind. In the Nidanavaga Samyutta, there is an account of the Buddha's intellectual investigation when he was still a bodhisattva, where he uncovered his hypothesis about human condition, human cognition. Origination of suffering and the cessation of suffering. He started engaging in depth. He went backwards step by step to figure out the cause of each of the links in origination. Concerning this, the Buddha then advised us, just consider how things work, letting go of all of your personal control. Sit down in meditation, he says, like a cat in the forest, and become a watcher, just to see what happens next. Practice this skilled form of observation, not too tight and not too loose. Discover what's happening from your inside out. And only then can you realize the true nature of how things actually work. The Buddha tells us as you go along, only believe what you see, not what even he tells you. Just believe what you are able to see. Practice this way to attain knowledge and vision. This becomes your solid foundation for knowledge and wisdom. In Majjhima Nikaya Chittaka Sutta, he tells us that you must see and understand the origination of arising phenomena, the disappearance of the arising phenomena, how mental proliferation occurs, the danger of this mental proliferation, and what is the escape. Paticca Samuppada, the dependent origination, then becomes very important. The Buddha's version of human cognition turns out to be more complex than the modern master's program versions of human cognition studies that started in 1990 in the United States. This was 2,500 years ago that he discovered this information. If we want to understand completely the nature of everything, the fastest way is to understand this progress, to experience it more closely and watch it in everyday life. Dependent origination became the Buddha's fast track. It became the spine of his teaching. Paticca Samuppada became very important. One who sees the dependent origination sees the Dhamma, he said. One who sees the Dhamma sees dependent origination. We have these suttas, many suttas that are listed here, where he talks about this in each one of these, in the Mahahatipadama Sutta, in the Mahatattva Sankhara Sutta, in the Mahapandika Sutta. He gives the students drills, he gives the monks drills to help them understand anatta, to give up their personal concern. He teaches them how to do the drills to give up the personal idea in the Chittaka Sutta. By seeing dependent origination, we're told in the Mahavagga that the Four Noble Truths become completely understood and totally realize the three characteristics of existence. Why? Because we begin to watch them happening. So this Paticca Samuppada, it's a cycle of what? It's a cycle of human cognition made up of 12 conditional links, producing an energy that traps us in our suffering if we have no knowledge of how these links are working. It goes round and round and round. I like that part. So to get free, what do I need to know? There are 6 terms that we seem to hear in Buddhist writings today. We hear a lot about meditation. They talk to us about mindfulness. They tell us about delusion. They talk to us about craving. They tell us about purification of mind. They talk to us about retraining of the mind. But we need to know what they mean and how they are a team that reveals the truth. What is meditation? It means to first learn how to observe what we are doing one thing at a time, which is the basic training, which was the Vipassana meditation, similar to what we do today. But there was a second level of training no one seems to talk about, and that was the practice of observing the movements of mind's attention in order to see clearly how things actually work. And this is TWIM, tranquil wisdom, insight, meditation. This is right effort. Practicing TWIM, we are attempting to impersonally notice how mind's attention moves without telling it to go. What is mindfulness? Well, mindfulness has to work with the meditation. So mindfulness means remembering to keep the observation going all the time. Remembering what to do if something pulls your attention away from your object of meditation or pulls your mind away from some task that you are doing in daily life. What is delusion? Delusion is your personal perspective. It is the false idea that everything happening is part of you. The consequences of this false idea is that you begin to take life too personally, too intensely, too seriously. It becomes hard to abandon the distractions and quietly focus your mind's attention on an object of meditation or on what you're doing when you become so overly concerned with what else is coming to your mind. This causes tension and tightness in your body. What is craving? If we do not understand what craving is, we cannot end suffering. It's as simple as that. If we don't learn how to explain this, we're in trouble. Craving is at the root of suffering. That's what we're told. Craving is the I like it or the I don't like it mind. It is the first personal opinion in the links of deep origination that follows the impersonal contact of any sense work. The Buddha uncovered a symptom of this arising craving. The craving always seems to manifest as tension and tightness in the mind and in the body. The symptom warns you suffering is coming. The medical problems are evident. Mental proliferation follows craving. This clinging causes tension. Tension leads to stress disorders. The stress disorders can lead to depression. Depression can lead to augmented dis-ease of the both mind and the body. But what is the purification of mind? Purification of mind means the shifting of unwholesome mind states to wholesome mind states. This is the volitional action. You choose to do this only when you understand that there is a possibility for change. You have to have that knowledge. The bottom line is you can retrain your mind. You are discovering that nothing is happening to you. Everything in life is happening from you. What is the unwholesome and the wholesome mind state? Well, the unwholesome mind state marks itself by tension and tightness, and it causes an unclear thinking or a clouded mind. A wholesome mind state reduces tension, and the tightness clears up, and you have clearer thinking. The benefit of a wholesome mind, the Buddha realized the benefit of wholesome mind states. In the Dvaita Vitakka Sutta, he talks about before he was enlightened, he investigated the outcome of wholesome and unwholesome mind states. Supporting the liberation of mind, we're all trying to get free from the suffering. But what is a liberated mind? A liberated mind is one with no tension and no tightness. All pursuit of concepts has stopped arising, and no more personal concern, no urgency, no serious desire for something to happen anymore. We must allow this opening to occur when conditions are right. There can be no pressure, no overworking of the mind. This is not something you personally make happen. This is a still point. This is a pure mind, a mind without any craving for clinging that is possible to experience. This is experiencing an experience of no experience. You're experiencing an experience of no experience. Development of mind. The Pali word for this is bhavana, most often translated to mean development of mind. However, there's another translation for this word that is development of behavior. And this is very logical because mind is the forerunner of all things, including how thoughts lead to intention, actions, and consequences of behavior. So how do we develop the mind? If we keep on relaxing the tension and tightness in the mind and the mind will create a new tendency that will move towards responding instead of reacting. This gradually happens when the idea of letting go of mental or physical distractions takes hold. The finest outcome of the meditation practice is the positive personality change that happens and a healthy modification of behavior. Did the Buddha practice like that? Well, we believe he did. Gautama left enough clues about his approach to meditation. Some of them are shrouded in questionable ideas about what certain translations might imply to us. We have to look for them very carefully. But in the Anupada Sutta, we find out the monks practiced a form of light meditation that was an insight meditation like Vipassana that is different than what we so vastly see today. They went beyond this kind of observation into another level of observation by way of a lighter serenity meditation that left open the way for a better awareness. Sariputta he left us his meditation report to the Buddha in this sutta where he described to him his states one by one as they occurred. This is very important, one by one as they occurred. This left us knowledge that there was another form of jhana other than the absorption practices that the Buddha used for 6 years before his awakening. Today, in the Mahasalya, we see that the Buddha was open to the idea of Samatha and Vipassana practices working in tandem together, yoked together like two bulls that were pulling a cart, like two horses pulling a wagon. We are reminded that this is possible. In other texts, it tells us this. This is the only way through the gate into cessation level of suffering. So today, TWIM uses this approach and coupled with experiencing the natural development of the path of the Brahma Viharas, or the heavenly abodes. And the Brahma Viharas are simply the practice of a natural growth or a natural evolution of metta to karuna to mudita to upekkha, happening gradually with the jhanas developing in the deeper states. We believe that this is what the Buddha was using the night that he was under the bo tree. There are clues that indicate this to us. In the Mahasachika Sutta, he reveals that something changes in his meditation that night in the third watch of the night. If you sit under a tree, you can experience a wider, spacious mind. Many people tell us about watching a tree or sitting under a tree and just taking in everything and leaving life behind. What happens to the mind? The Buddha found an easy practice that all people could keep using all the time. And most likely the common layman used the Brahma Vihara practice because it is that practice which became most useful in daily life. During your conventional life, this practice shifted people's thinking, and it led to more peaceful solutions because of cultivation of patience and forgiveness, compassion and loving kindness. And what was that practice that brought up more pure energy and lightness. It is the retraining of mind that did this. Right effort shows us how the Buddha most likely retrained the mind tendency. Effort is not meaning work hard. Effort in Buddhism actually means work smarter. The first step of right effort was to recognize when the unwholesome mind state was in the mind. Release the unwholesome mind state and then relax any tension in the mind and in the body. Bring up a wholesome mind state and gently smile as you return to your object or task. Then keep that wholesome mind state going. Repeat this only when you are pulled away from what you are doing, or only when you are pulled away from the object of meditation. It looks like this. This is a practice for behavior development. The Buddha suggested we change our perspective of life from a personal perspective, atta, where we're taking everything personally. We change it to practice living through a more impersonal perspective called anatta instead. How do we do that? By practicing this wheel. It's an easy practice. Anyone can learn. Once you get it going, you can keep it going all the time in life. Just as you're sitting there, when you're working, when you're walking, when you're talking, when you're doing anything in the office, even anywhere, you recognize a tightness in your mind. It's your personal opinion. It's waiting to grab you. You release it. You relax. You re-smile. You return back to whatever you're doing or back to your meditation. You repeat this when you're pulled away again. So the Buddha's line of human cognition allows us to see deeper. As an arising hindrance tries to pull your attention away, it allows you to see how the arising suffering happens. You see how the personal perspective is causing the tension and the tightness. You'll experience the cessation of suffering and understand there is an escape. Each cycle of the practice reveals how things work. As we keep it going, we see the principal parts of the Dhamma as they're happening, not talking about them, not listening to someone tell us what they are. We begin to see them. And remember, in the beginning, the Buddha said, don't believe anything unless you see it. And then he told you how to see it. You see the Four Noble Truths. Each time we run the right effort cycle, we witness suffering, the cause, the cessation, and the path. The three characteristics are given to us each time we practice the cycle. We experience the three characteristics of existence. We see anicca, we see dukkha, we see anatta. Many medical conditions can be relieved practicing this meditation. We've already seen this happen with many of our students around the world. We can teach them how to do pain management during terminally ill cases or accident cases. Give them some forms of tinnitus or vertigo that disappear. Their anger patterns disappear once they understand how they arise. High blood pressure and headaches seem to dissipate. Stress disorders can be relieved with less medication sometimes or none. Reduction of many depressive disorders. We are not advocating no drugs. We are advocating get your patient to the level where he can learn how to work with you to reduce the drugs, and if it's possible, live independently without the drugs. We don't believe that you need to have the drugs all the time. Anxiety and panic attacks can virtually disappear if you have the knowledge I've just shown you. Severe grief can be alleviated in a person by explaining how grief arises, that it will pass away, how to allow the painful feeling, and accept it rather than fighting with it. Other damaging reactive emotional states can be managed as well. The question is, how do the conditions arise? Practice using this following chart that we've developed. Now, this one is rather complicated. This is a 12-point chart that shows you all of the individual links of dependent origination. This is from a workshop that I did about an hour long that I do. But the first two links are interesting because ignorance just means you don't know about any of this. Formations in consciousness are potentials that exist within you and are activated through the sense doors. They're like a pool that's sitting there. Impersonal links Your mentality, materiality, sixth sense, doers, contact, and feeling are bodily functions. You have nothing to do with them. If you think that you control your seeing or your hearing, you need to call me tomorrow morning when you wake up. And you tell me if before you opened your eye, you decided what you were going to see. You didn't. I know you won't. And then the last part here, these are red because these are the personal links. This is what Dojima, this is what the Buddha is saying. You can let go of. You can let go of the personal action. Somebody else that you want to yell back, you can stop doing that. You can look at the habitual tendency you have that when they say this to you, I always do this. And you notice it, so you stop doing it. You can go back and say, I'm going to stop running the story about how much I dislike you when you say that to me. I'm not going to do it anymore. So you close that library of reaction. And then what's left is just your personal opinion. When the painful feeling comes up, I don't like it. When the good one comes up, I like it. I want it. I can't think about anything else. But there's another chart, and this is the training chart we give our students. Because this chart is interesting. We now know that we're in this kind of aware jhana, we're in this kind of aware training of meditation. We can actually watch things happening. When we get to a certain level, we can notice the contact happening. We can realize the feeling coming up because we can sense it when we get calm enough. We can see the difference, feel the difference of the tension. Realize the craving. You watch it. So by using this chart, what we usually do in our workshops is that we take examples. This chart would say at the bottom, tell me how anger works. Tell me how it operates. Tell me how depression works. I once proved to a woman who was literally ready to commit suicide. She was depressed, her husband and her son ready to leave, the family ready to break up. And I sat down with her and I said, but you know, this depression isn't yours. And she said, well, of course it is. Everything that's happening is my fault. Everything is happening to me. It's the weight of the world on me. And I said, but it's not your depression. And she said, well, what do you mean? So we got out on the coffee table and we drew the links of dependent origination, a whole chart. And I showed her how the first set of links are impersonal. And she said, but I was sitting there and I got depressed. I was just sitting on the couch and I was crocheting. And all of a sudden I got depressed and I had to put it away. And I started crying and I went to my room and I turned out the light because I had to be away from my family. So what do you mean this is not me? And I said, look at what happened. You were sitting on the couch and your mind met a mind object. Mind consciousness arose and contact happened. When contact happens, feeling arises. A painful feeling is what came up. With feeling as conditioned, craving arises. And this is the I don't like mind that you experienced. She really disliked what the thought was. And then she jumps immediately. These two are so close together when they happen, so fast in neuroscience, that we don't think there's two, and we think it's all right for somebody to say that these two together are grasping. Well, grasping is a symptom or a feeling that happens in craving or clinging, but these are two links. And this is the story about why you don't like something. This is just, I don't like it. These two different things happening. And then her habitual tendency was, if she feels like this happening at all, this kind of painful feeling, what she does every time is that she leaves what she's doing, she leaves the people, she goes away, she hides, and she weeps and falls asleep. So that's her critical tendency. It's just what she does every time. The truth is you spend 85 or 90% of your life reacting. You are not responding. You are reacting in life. So you need to figure out how that works. And now we explain this to her with the birth of action, was her getting up and leaving. And then what happened to her? The aging and death of that event. So this is actually a chart of a phenomenological event. One event, her getting depressed, her having painful feelings, falling into depression, and then running away and having sorrow, lamentation, and grief, and despair. Well, she looked at me and she said, "You mean it's not mine?" I said, "No, it's not yours." She said, "It's really not me?" You see what her problem was, is she believed that everything that was happening to her, every sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, was me. It's who I am. It is myself. She was caught in atta perspective. This is what the Buddha found. That's why she was suffering. So I have to conclude that the science of mind began with the Buddha, because perhaps we could consider him the honorary father of cognitive science. He showed us how things work, how to reduce our suffering. He revealed how nothing is happening to us, everything is happening from us. And he gave us the total responsibility to change our life and the way to do it. And after over 2,500 years, we still have these instructions. We can still do this because of the monks. Because of them, they preserved the pieces. Maybe the pieces got a little mixed up, maybe. Maybe that's why we think we can't get into jhana for 10 years. Maybe that's why we think the attainments aren't going to happen anymore. Maybe that's why we think there's no hope of anything like that going on. But something was going on back in the time of the Buddha, where in 7 days, 10 days, you could feel this happening. You could feel it. You could experience it. That's what we're telling you. Right effort got lost. Right effort is the structure, the skeleton that sat under all of these different types of meditations. If we reclaim right effort, we can do what we want at the retreat. When we go home, we can keep doing right effort all the time, and we can have fun doing it. So practicing right effort purely without mixing anything else into it for 1 week, you can have a relaxed mind and body. Keep it light, keep smiling, have fun. This is a new science. You, when you learn how to do this, you can change this world. You will understand when you see how something happens for you, like what happened to that woman, and then other people found out from her how happy she got, how everything changed, her whole attitude. That completes the puzzle. All the pieces that were preserved by the monks are there in a box. All the texts are still there. But it's 2,500 years old. We shouldn't expect it's precise and easy. And we should never give up, because every generation of monastics is expected to listen very carefully. And when they hear something is not working, smoke out the sheds. Start looking in the text. Search for the answers. Put it together so it does work for the attitude.
Now, we would like to have the Sinhala translation of it, and Mr. Sanjana Daya Sankar is from our university, from the soft skill development unit, and he would elaborate on the Sinhala translation of Venerable Tema.
KMSDS, United and Rational Buddhist Society. Actually, we must appreciate her effort to explain about the Buddhism. Because now my duty is to explain something to give her. Actually, it would not be the complete summary in Sinhala. To give her a little bit of that. in Sinhala. මම හිතන්නේ මගේ විෂයපතේ වෙන්නේ මනෝවිද්‍යාව සහ දර්ශනය. ඒ නිසා අපේ ගෞරවනීය ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලා මේ ස්ථානයේ වැඩම කර සිටිනවා. විශේෂයෙන් මගේ ආචාර්යවරුන් වන ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලා දෙනමු වැඩ සිටිනවා. උන්වහන්සේලාගේ සහාය ඇතිව මම ඉතාමත් කෙටි මේ පිළිබඳව යමක් සඳහන් කරන්න. මාතෘකාව වශයෙන් ගත්තේ මම හිතන්නේ අපේ බෞද්ධ දර්ශනය ගැන Buddhist meditation and the birth of cognitive science. බෞද්ධ භාවනාව සහ cognitive science කියලා කියන්නේ ප්‍රජානන විද්‍යාවන්. අපි සිංහල භාෂාවෙන් කියන්නේ බෞද්ධ භාවනාව සහ ප්‍රජානන විද්‍යාවන් පිළිබඳව කලේ. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන් මම හිතන්නේ මේ රැස් සිටින පිරිසට දැන ගැනීම සඳහා භාවනාව කියන එක පිළිබඳව අය උන්වහන්සේ තාමත් යලින් පැහැදිලි කළා. මම හැරට කැමති අපේ නීත හඳුරන දෙසට මේ භාවනාව පිළිබඳව අපේ ගෞරවනීය ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ නමකින් ඉතාමත් කෙටි දැනගන්නට මේ සිංහල පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් වශයෙන් භාවනාව පිළිබඳව.
අතරම සිස්ටර් කේවා විසින් පැහැදිලි කරපු දේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් නෙවෙයි මම කතා කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. භාවනාව සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපේ ඉගැන්වීම තමයි මනස දියුණු කිරීම, මනස පුහුණු කිරීම තමයි භාවනාවෙන් අපි උගන්වන්නේ. එතකොට බුදුහාමුදුරන්ගේ දේශනාවට අනුව මම දැන් අපි සාමාන්‍ය අදහසක් උන්වහන්සේගේ විඥානික දේශනාවෙන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම මිනිස්යන්ගේ මනස උත්පත්තියෙන් පිරිසිදුයි. ඒ තුළ විවිධ දේවල් නැහැ. කහට නැහැ. පවසන මිදම් බික්ක වේචිත්තං කියලා බුදුහාමුදුර දේශනා කරන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒ මනස මේ එදිනෙදා භාවිතය තුළ ඉන්ද්‍රියානුසාරයෙන් ගන්නා තොරතුරු මත තමයි අපි ಜಾති ආගම් කුල විවිධ තුමිග වචනින් කිව්වොත් අපි ස්ට්‍රෙස් විවිධ දේවල් අපි ගන්න. ඉතින් ඒ ගත්තට පස්සේ අපි නැවත ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නේ ඒවට යටත් වෙලා. ඒ හින්දා බුදුහාමුදුර අවුරුදු 2500 ඉස්සෙල්ලා හොයාගත්ත දර්ශනය තුළින් උගන්වන දේ තමයි මේ භාවනාව තුළින් මනස තියෙන්න ඕන තැනට ගන්න පුහුණු කරන එක තමයි භාවනාවෙන් කරන්නේ. ඒ සඳහා තමයි සමස්ත දේශනාව තුළින් මඟ පෙන්වීම කරන්නේ. ඉතින් ඇත්තටම අපි ගැන හිතලා බැලුවොත් එහෙම අපි එනකොට මනස පිරිසිදුයි. නමුත් ගත්ත දේවල් අනුව දැන් ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙමින් ඉන්නවා. අපිට අපි අමතකයි. අපේ මානසික මූලික ස්වභාවය අමතකයි. ඒ නිසා හැබැයි අපේ තුල තියෙන අපි හොල්සම කියන්නේ කුසල අකුසල වශයෙන් ගත්තාම අපි අකුසල දේවල් කරන්න බොහොම ඉක්මනට අන්හොල්සම් දේවල්. ඒකට හේතුව තමයි සංසාර පුරුද්දෙන්ම ලෝභ ද්වේෂ මෝහ ආදී අපි පුරුදු කරලා තියෙන ඒවා ස්ථාවර වෙලා තියෙනවා මේ වෙනකොට. හැබැයි අන්හොල්සම් things එහෙම නැත්නම් කුසල wholesome things කුසල සහගත දේවල් කරන්න නම් අපි නැවත මනස පුහුණු කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ නිසා ලෝභ ද්වේෂ මෝහ කියන දැනට යන්න. ඒ සඳහා වන පුහුණුව තමයි භාවනාව තුළින් ස්ථාවර කරන්නේ ලබා දෙන්නේ. හොඳයි. හැබැයි ඒකත් අල්ලා ගන්නට නෙවෙයි මේ සියල්ල තුළින් පිරිසිදු මානසිකත්වයක් ඇති කර ගැනීම සඳහා. එතකොට කුණ්‍ය සයන්ස් පිළිබඳව මම කතා කරන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. අවසාන වශයෙන් බුදුදහම තුළින් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ මනස පුද්ගලයාගේ පාලනයට තමා විසින් ගන්න ඕනේ කියන දේ. එතකොට අර ඔළුවට ලෝකේ කඩා වැටෙනවා වගේ මිනිස්සු වැඩ කරන්නේ තමන්ගේ පාලනයෙන් මනස මිදුණු නිසා. එහෙනම් භාවනාව තුළින් උගන්වන්නේ තමන්ගේ මනස තමන් තුළ පාලනයට ගන්න.
ව්‍යාප්‍රාණ්‍යතකේ නමස්කාර පුරක ප්‍රණාම යුක්ත කරනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඇල්බර්ට් අයින්ස්ටයින් සඳහන් කරනවා කිසියම් ඥානයක් විද්‍යාවට අනුකූල වෙයිද එය බුදුදහමයි කියලා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඇල්බර්ට් අයින්ස්ටයින් අපි හඳුනාගන්නේ ඒ ලෝකකට විද්‍යාඥයෙක් වශයෙන්. එතුමන් එක සැනක සඳහන් කරනවා බුද්දිසම් බුදුදහම කිසියම් විද්‍යානුකූල ඥානයක් ප්‍රකට කරනවා කියලා. විශේෂයෙන්ම ඒකට අපිට සම්බන්ධ කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ කොග්නිටිව් සයන්ස් කියන එක අපි හඳුන්වන්නේ ප්‍රජානන විද්‍යාවන් කියන එක. ප්‍රජානනය කියලා කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? what is the cognitive? ප්‍රජානනය කියලා කියන්නේ අපේ මනස. කුසලතා, හැකියාව, බුද්ධිය. මම හිතන්නේ මනෝවිද්‍යාත්මක දෘෂ්ටියෙන් ගත්තොත් අපේ තියෙනවා කොග්නිටිව් සයිකෝതെරපිස්, කොග්නිටිව් සයිකොලොජි. කියන්නේ ප්‍රජානන මනෝවිද්‍යාව. මේ හැම දෙයක්ම මේ ක්ෂේපරාසයෙන් ගන්නට පුළුවන්. ඒ නිසා අපේ හඳුන සඳහන් කරපු විදිහට විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ මනස how to develop the mind මනස අභිවෘද්ධිය සංවර්ධනය කිරීම සඳහා මේ භාවනාවෙන් සුවිශාල පිටුබලයක් ලබා ගන්නට පුළුවන්. විශේෂයෙන් මෙතන තියෙනවා යමක් විශේෂයෙන් සඳහන් කළ යුතු. I have to conclude that science of mind began with the Buddhas. Perhaps you would consider him the father of cognitive science. මේ ප්‍රජානන විද්‍යාවේ පියා ලෙස බුදුන් වහන්සේ හඳුන්වා දිය හැකියි කියලා. ඒ තාමත් මම හිතන්නේ නිවැරදි. මොකද ඒ වගේම තිබෙනවා after over 2500 years we still have these structures can still be determined. තවමත් ඒ සත්‍යය මේ ලෝකයේ තුල පවතිනවා. මම හිතන්නේ අපේ ආම්දුරේ ශාසනය අන්තර්ධාන වෙනවා ඇති වෙලා යන අවුරුදු 5000කින් පස්සේ දැන් 2500ක් ගත වෙලා තිබෙනවා. එතකොට මේ සත්‍යය අදටත් බලමුයි කියන එක තමයි එතනින් අපි සඳහන් කරන්න උත්සාහ කළේ. මම හිතන්නේ සිංහල පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් මම මොනිකෝ වගේ විශාල වශයෙන් අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඊටමත් කෙටියෙන් අපේ මිකුණියගේ අදහස් මම ඔබ වෙත ගෙනහැර පෑවේ. ඒ නිසා සමස්තයක් වශයෙන් ගත්තට පස්සේ ඒ වගේ මම අපේ මහාචාර්ය රනිල් මහත්මයාත් එක්ක කිව්වේ මොකද actually she is a native American. She was born in America, I think. එතකොට මෙවැනි විශේෂයෙන්ම මම හිතන්නේ මේ බෞද්ධ දර්ශනය සහ බුදුන් වහන්සේගේ මේ ඉගැන්වීම් තුළ ප්‍රකට කරන කාරණාව. මොකද දැන් අපි ජාතීන් වශයෙන් සහ භාෂාවන් අතරින් මේ තියෙන ලිමිට්ස් සීමාවන් නැහැ කියන එක මම හිතන්නේ මේ අරහාම ඔප්පු වෙනවා. මේ අරහා අපිට හොඳ ලොකු පණිවිඩයක් ගෙනල්ට හැකියාවක් තියෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ පැරණිතම පීඨය අපේ එක්කඩුවේ සුමංගල හාමුදුරුවෝ සෝරත හාමුදුරුවෝ බිහි කරපු පිරිවෙන විශ්වවිද්‍යාලය අපේ බෞද්ධ දර්ශනීය බුදු දහම කේන්ද්‍ර කරගෙන තමයි ප්‍රතිෂ්ඨාපනය කළේ. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මේ සියල්ලක්ම අරගෙන අපිට ලෝකයේ ඉහළම තත්ත්වයක් කරා යන්නට පුළුවන් කියන පණිවිඩය මේ දුක්ඛිනියසෙන් ලබා දෙනවා. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ World University Project මම හිතන්නේ ලෝක විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ව්‍යාපෘතියට අපගේ හෘදයාංගම ස්තුතිය පළ කළ යුතුයි. ඒ වගේම මොකද විශේෂයෙන් අපේ මේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලය වෙනුවෙන් මේ the contribution දායකත්වයේ සල්කන. හොඳයි මම ඊට වඩා අදහස් දක්වන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ නැහැ. තවත් මෙවැනි දේවල් සංවිධානය කිරීමට ඒ ව්‍යාපෘතියට හැකියාව ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරමි. අවනියන්න වෙනවා.
I would like to call upon Professor Ann Cato to the title of our talk is The Neuroscience of Meditation and Mindfulness. Over to you, Professor.
Please let me know if you have any trouble hearing me. I could speak louder or put the microphone closer or further away. So as a neuroscientist, I'm going to tell you what I think is the neuroscience of meditation and mindfulness. Now, in principle, you will have the second slide. One will be in Vietnamese, the other will be in English. So before coming to give this presentation today, I was that I thought was very interesting. It's called Buddha's Brain by Rick Henson. And what he said is this something? Can't hear? So in this book, Rick Hansen has a very compelling statement which says that meditation is to the brain what aerobic exercise is to the heart. So in other words, we should do meditation just as much as we should do physical exercise for our heart. So work on your brain and work on your heart. Now there's
I will one slide. I will see. Yeah. And go back. Meditation of the brain and aerobic රික් හැඩ්සන් විසින් PhD එකේ දීලා තියෙන පොතක් සම්බන්ධව ඊට පස්සේ මෙතන කියන්නේ countless මේ භාවනාව සඳහා අප්‍රමාණ ක්‍රියාකාර අරමුණ එකම වේ. වැඩි සතුට සාමය ආයතනික ආයතිතිය ඒකග්‍රහය වැඩි දියුණු කිරීම සිහි නුවණ සිතුවිලි හැඟීම් මනස සැලසුම් මේ ගැන තමයි ඊළඟට සයින්.
So for us, as you know better than I do, that there are countless ways of meditating, but the purpose is the same. Now, I'm a pure neuroscientist. I am not a Buddhist. I am not a particularly religious person, but I certainly believe that meditating will provide more peace and happiness, less stress, better concentration, greater self-awareness, and better processing of thoughts and feelings. Now meditation, as we know, can decrease the heart rate and blood pressure. We can measure this. It can decrease stress. We can measure the levels of cortisol in the blood. It can stimulate the immune system. These are also very easy experiments to do. More difficult is to understand how we can increase the sense of well-being and to diminish pain and depression.
භාවනාව මගින් හෘදය වස්තුව පිළිබඳ අපිට තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න ඒ වගේම බ්ලඩ් හයිපර්ටෙන්ෂන් එහෙම නැත්නම් බ්ලඩ් ප්‍රෙෂර් අධික රුධිර පීඩනය අඩු කර ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම ආතතිය වගේ ඒවා අඩු කර ගන්න පුළුවන්. තුන්වෙනිව වශයෙන් ඉමුන් සිස්ටම් එක ඒ කියන්නේ අපේ පැවැත්ම සඳහා ප්‍රගුණය කරගෙන increase a sense of ඉන්න ප්‍රගුණය කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම කියන්නේ වේදනාව විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි දන්නවා ගොඩාක් වේදනාවක් තියෙන ලෙඩ තියෙනවා කැන්සර් වගේ ඒ වගේම ડિප්‍රෙෂන් මේවට භාවනාව පාවිච්චි කරන්න.
So mindfulness, if you'll excuse my very simple explanation as a non-Buddhist and a non-meditator, mindfulness, I've read, means paying attention to the present moment deliberately and non-judgmentally.
එතකොට සිහි පැවැත්ම කියලා කියන්නේ mindfulness සිතාමතා ඕනෑකමින් විශාල විචාරශීලීව මේ මොහොතේ කෙරෙන අවධානය පවත්වා ගැනීම. ඊට පස්සේ භාවනාව කියන්නේ
Now meditation, in my simple terms, although mindfulness and meditation are closely related, they are not synonymous. The term meditation refers to a wide range of practices that simply involve training the mind to achieve a particular state of consciousness, particularly for relaxation. No? Now the question for neuroscientists has been, what is actually happening in the brain? Is there something that we can study to say that your brain has been modified because you have done meditation? Now neuroscientists have been very skeptical about this. They have said for many years that meditation is simply relaxation. But what is actually changing in your brain? Now, in order to go into this in more detail, I'd like to tell you about the brain, a little bit about the brain. You can see a photograph here of the human brain. It's an incredible object. It has 100 billion cells, and there are 1 trillion synaptic connections. Now, what do I mean by a synaptic connection? A synaptic connection occurs between one nerve cell and a second nerve cell. So the first nerve cell releases a molecule that touches the second nerve cell and causes it to activate. So what is happening in our brain? We have electrical signals coming down the neurons. Then it's a chemical signal that goes from one neuron to another. And then again, it's an electrical signal. So it's a highly, highly complex machine. Now, the brain contains, as I say, 100 billion cells, and this represents 3,200,000 kilometers of cables that are interconnected by 1 trillion synaptic connections. Now all of this is very delicately placed in our head So it's 1.5 liters and weighs 1.5 kilograms. However, the consummation of energy is not greater than that of a bed light. So it's quite the most extraordinary organ in the entire body, and probably the most sophisticated computer that has ever been designed. And of course, if we could understand that, we would understand a lot more about our universe. Now, as I said, the brain is the most complicated object in the universe. It controls all of our body activities, intelligence, emotion, learning, thinking, deciding, memory, dreaming, seeing, smelling, hearing, movement, and heart rate. So, of course, do everything possible to look after this precious organ in our head. Now, what differs between us and simple mammals, such as a monkey? Why are we different from a monkey? Well, it's because of this structure on the outside of our brain. It's called the cerebral cortex. And this is the outer layer of the brain. It's only a few millimeters in thickness. So here, if you take a section of the brain, you'll see on the outside there are these gray cells. It's called gray matter. And inside is the white matter. The white matter are all the wires that connect the neurons. So in the cerebral cortex, it's a few millimeters in thickness, and it's composed of all of these nerve cells. Now, the reason that we are different from other mammals is because we have such a highly developed brain. It has all of its folds called gyrus and sulci. So this is something that other mammals do not contain, and they are unable to achieve the same intellectual function. Now, the brain is very carefully divided into 4 areas. The frontal lobe, so this is this part of your brain, which is extremely important for intellect. You're the way you can hear me. And the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe back here, it is responsible for vision. And then on the side are the temporal lobes, very important for hearing and speech. So this is just a short resume of this. The frontal lobe here, reasoning, decision-making, emotion, planning, that is the real high intellectual part of your brain. Is there a problem? It seems it's difficult. Okay, then the parietal lobe, which you'll see here in purple, is responsible for orientation in time and space. Then there's the occipital lobe, as I told you, which is very important in vision, and then the temporal lobes for speech and hearing. It's interesting for example, when you do meditation, there's a decrease in the activity of the particular region called the parietal lobe. But I'll go into more of this. Now, the brain is divided into 3 different divisions. The first one is the cerebral cortex. This is what we call the supercomputer. It allows us to plan and to think. They're where our emotions are. A more ancient part of the brain is called the limbic system, and this is composed of the thalamus, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and the amygdala. For example, we know that the hippocampus is extremely important for memory. Then the third part of the brain, the general big categories, are the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. And these control heart rate, breathing, and digestion. So in summary, the cerebral cortex sits on top of the brain and allows us to think. The limbic brain sits below the cortex and it allows us to survive. Whereas the brainstem sits below all of this, it's in the back here, and it controls all of your vital organs. Now what is inside? Inside the basic units are the neurons. So the neurons are composed of cell bodies that you see in the middle, these round things. Then on the left you see dendrites. So these are projections that are coming into the cell body. Then there are axons, and this is taking information out of the cell body to the exterior. So this is very important, these three particular parts of every neuron in your brain. And there are many dozens of different types of neurons in order to enable their specific function. Now within your brain you have these neuronal networks. So you have these billions of cells that are interconnecting with each other. And if you do certain types of use particular dyes, you can see this incredible network that is taking place within your brain. Now people have even been able to label the wires and the different cells, and you can have these images that give you sort of a better idea of the complexity and the wiring in the brain. So this is very important, the basics of neuroscience. You have a neuron, this particular cell that's so vital. It has the cell body, it has an axon, and it has dendrites. Now here you can see the dendrite which comes down and it makes a connection with a second neuron. And the second neuron, here, the first neuron releases something called the neurotransmitter, which goes across the synaptic cleft and it activates the second neuron. So that is the basis, really, of neuroscience. That's what your neuron, your synapse, and your connections. Now this synapse, this particular region where the chemistry takes place in your brain, is the region that exists between two nerve cells. So you can see that this particular nerve cell is releasing something called a neurotransmitter. It's going across the synapse, and then it activates the second neuron via a specific receptor. Now, of course, we know several hundred now neurotransmitters, and of course, as many receptors in the brain. So if something goes wrong, you can imagine the number of mental disorders that one can have if something goes wrong with this incredible network of cells. So then, just as a conclusion for that basic part of neuroscience, the brain is in a constant state of electrical activity. The neurons are either ready to fire or not to fire according to an impulse. They're always ready. And as a result of all of these things, the brain can see, it can feel, it can sense pain, and it can remember. Now, brain scientists come from many disciplines. Myself, I'm more of a molecular biologist, but we need anatomists, physiologists, neurochemists, pharmacologists, and genetics. And only in this way will we be able to understand our brain. So now, we always think that the brain is a static machine after birth, after adulthood. So we know that the brain changes when you're small, until about 20 years of age. And then we have what is known as our adult brain. Now, what is amazing, sometimes people have said, well, once you become an adult, you can't change your brain. There's nothing you can do. Well, in fact, there's a great deal that you can do to change your brain. But for a neuroscientist, we want to know what those changes are. Are these structural changes that we can actually measure? So then I'll go into the subject of plasticity. So when we talk about the adult brain being possible to change it, plasticity means the biological adaptation of the brain in response to a new experience or to a change. So by means of this plasticity, we can maintain, and our goal, of course, is to maintain and increase brain plasticity. And of course, this is what we would like to think is happening with meditation. Now, before going into, I'm very sorry about this static. Doesn't seem to be anything I can do for it. So plasticity, this term you hear from neuroscientists, is responsible for learning, performing new habits, and adjusting to new circumstances. So this is when you'll hear scientists talking about plasticity of the brain. It's very fashionable, certainly when we talk about memory. Now, two techniques within the last 15 or 20 years have allowed us to study these structural changes. And one of them involves imaging techniques, such as magnetic resonance imaging. You've certainly heard of this. And the second one is electrocardiogram. Now, brain imaging, it is very difficult, in fact, to study the brain because of the skull. Our brain is very protected by the skull. But now with imaging techniques, we can look inside the brain and see what is going on to a certain level. Now, with brain imaging techniques, you can study somebody who's doing a specific task, for example, a movement task, a visual task, and what scientists can see are certain regions of the brain which are activated. So these regions become lit up. So using magnetic resonance imaging, one can increase the blood flow in the active brain, and one can measure it using MRI. Now, some regions of the brain become lit up like this during thought and during speech. So that's why I've shown these other regions, such as the temporal lobe, the posterior cingulate cortex, but I will not go into these particular regions. Now, at this point, in the middle of a talk on meditation, I want to tell you an experiment which was done on London taxi drivers. Now, in fact, when we're studying meditation, we want to look at somebody's brain who has been concentrating for many years on one task. So as meditators, you have been doing one particular task for many years. Now, in London, they decided to look at the brains of taxi drivers. Now, in London, it's very hard to become a taxi driver because of the complexity of the streets. Not like Paris and New York, where they're very nicely aligned, but it's very difficult. They have to memorize the entire map of London, and it takes 2 years. And approximately only half of them pass the exam. So neuroscientists decided they would examine their brain, because something happened, certainly during 2 years, that they memorized every street in London. So they took 50 taxi drivers who went through this test, and then they took 50 people that were not taxi drivers. So what did they find? When they looked at the hippocampus, this is now using these imaging techniques at the top, this is the right hippocampus which became activated. Now this was a huge surprise. Nobody would have ever thought that there would be one particular region of the brain that was activated. So they could show that these people, during 2 years of serious memorization, could modify their brain. So this is a structural change in the brain. Now you can also look at it if you take musicians, violinists, piano players, and you look in their brain, very experienced people I would say, you'll notice that there's a modification, for example, in the motor cortex. So again, with imaging techniques, you can see what has happened to the brain during this very experienced, thought-out exercise. So, just to conclude from that part, the human brain has a great capacity to be plastic. You can modify your brain. It does not have fixed wiring, but it can be changed. And this can be examined experimentally. Now, parts of the brain can become larger with greater use. Now, let's talk about meditation. Now, what happens, what have they seen with meditation and the brain? And of course, there is an enormous modification and plasticity that occurs in the brain. Now, two people who were very instrumental in the early studies on the effects of meditation in the United States, Richard Davidson, who is director of the Laboratory of Brain Imaging and the Center of Investigating Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin, he became involved in some studies with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who was very interested also in neuroscience. So they formed a team, and the team was also composed of another Buddhist monk whose name is Matthew Ricard, and he now is head of the Session Monastery in Nepal outside of Kathmandu. Now, Matthew Ricard was trained as a cell biologist in France. He did a PhD in cell biology, and then he decided to become a Buddhist monk. And he has lived in the Himalayas for 40 years. But he was very eager to get into these experiments. He said, I will help in any way possible. You can study my brain, living brain. So they flew him to the United States, and there you can see on the left-hand side, there's Matthew Ricard. They're putting him into this magnetic resonance machine, and they're going to study his brain. Here's another monk. Once they did the first studies with Matthew Ricard, they were so astounded by these studies, then they said, we'll have to bring in other monks. We need people that have been meditating at least 10,000 hours. So it was impossible to take somebody who had just started meditation or had done a little bit of meditation. So that's why they brought in a certain number of monks, knowing that they had done such years and years and hours of meditation. So what they found is that the meditation, in fact, grew bigger brains. So the regions of the brain that were particularly enlarged were these Brodmann areas, the 9 and the 10. This is in the prefrontal cortex. This became larger. And also in a region called the insula, which is shown on the bottom. And in fact, if you look at this graph, the controls are in red, the meditators are in blue, and the blue, they're the ones that have the larger region in the prefrontal cortex and in the insula. So this should be encouraging for those of you who are experimenting, who are long-standing meditators, that your brain is bigger. Now, the second technique that has been absolutely revolutionary to try and understand the brains of meditating people is using EEG, electroencephalography, which involves putting on electrodes onto the skull. So, first of all, I should say these experiments are not easy. You do these experiments using a scanner. It makes a huge amount of noise. It's very, very difficult to concentrate. And that's why it was so remarkable that these monks, despite the noise, could maintain such a high level of meditation. So they did the same thing using the second technique. It's also quite uncomfortable because you have to place electrodes onto the skull. You have to put them on with a certain type of pace. You have about 100 to 200 electrodes on your head. And then, under these conditions, they can analyze the electrical activity of surface neurons. So here you can see Matthew Ricard. Again, he was always very eager to join in these experiments, and he faithfully put on these electrodes, and they were able to examine his brain. Now, what are they examining using this technique? They're examining brain waves, and brain waves are weak electrical waves produced by a large number of neurons firing rhythmically together. So, of course, this is a science in itself. In your brain, if you put on these electrodes, you can detect 5 different types of brain waves. Gamma waves, which are involved in active thought. Beta waves are alert and working. Most of your day you spend with beta waves in your brain. Then, if you are relaxed, you can have alpha waves. However, it is only people who meditate who can develop theta waves. This is just prior to sleep, but people who are meditating, of course, are not sleeping. And they achieve this incredible level of state of meditation, whereas normal people just will probably become drowsy and fall asleep. And then the 5th type of wave is the delta wave, involved in sleeping and dreaming. So this is just to recapitulate these brain waves. The beta waves are where you're active, talking on your phone, at your computer. Then when you go to the beach, you're more relaxed. And then the meditators who have this capacity to develop theta waves. Then when you're going to sleep, you have delta waves and another type of sleep, REM sleep, fast eye movement sleep, and then delta waves when you go into dreamless sleep. So what happened with the meditators? Well, the experienced meditators produced more theta waves than normal people. Now that was when they were doing deep meditation. For those of us who are incapable of doing deep meditation, we certainly haven't learned, then our brain waves will go at best from beta to alpha, but we cannot reach the state where we would have theta waves. Now what's happening in this? Using these 2 techniques, EEG and imaging, we can follow the electrical activity of the different parts of the brain. And that has been instrumental in studying meditation. Now, one other fact is that your brain is divided into the left side and into the right side. Now, your left brain is your brain that is very active in logic, analysis, organization, administration, maths and science, knowledge, facts, detail. Now, your right brain is doing something else. Your right brain is involved in emotion, intuition, spirituality, interpersonal skills, art and music, belief, and probably the picture, holistic picture, is involved in the right brain. So what happens now to those people who have many years of meditation? Is this picture modified? Well, in fact, what happens in the meditators is when they're doing meditation on compassion, back to this, brain activity shifts from the left brain is shifted to the left brain. So it goes from the right brain over to the left brain. And it's believed that people who are stressed or depressed, it's the right frontal cortex which is overactive, and the left frontal cortex is underactive. So happy people show greater activity in the left frontal cortex, and people who meditate have greater activity in the left frontal cortex. Now there's another person who has been very involved in these studies. His name is Dr. John Kabat-Zinn from the United States, and he talks about the happy brain. And he says the brain waves of meditators show why they're healthier. And neuroscientists have found that meditators shift their brain activity to different regions of the cortex. The brain waves in the stress-prone right frontal cortex move to the calmer left frontal cortex. In other words, they were calmer and happier than before. Of course, we would all like to attain this state. So questions for future research. Now you must understand this is a very young field. There have not been a huge number of experiments that have been done. It's been extremely complicated, and of course these techniques are very sophisticated. So a few of the questions that we'd like to know about, do different meditation practices produce distinct brain effects? So that would be, of course, very interesting. No. And does the development of certain brain areas through meditation help to prevent illness? So if you do a certain type of meditation, then you help your body recover from being in an ill state. Of course, we'd like to know how long does it take before meditation produces these significant effects in the brain. Of course, for people who don't meditate, you'd like to take the 2-week course and change your brain. Well, we know that that's certainly not possible. You have to be certainly much more dedicated. Now, I also went through a course in the United States and in Europe. They have courses called MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. And in this course, it's called The Science of Happiness, and they teach positive psychology. So I went on to this course. I found this was very interesting and very helpful. Of course, these are free courses. Anybody can go on if you have a computer and an internet connection. You can watch this course and participate and have a certificate. So this is how to learn science-based principles and practices for a happy, meaningful life. And finally then, in our overcharged societies where we're trying to do too many things and multitasking, we have a huge amount of stress. And this, of course, is affecting our brain and our nerve cells. So as you can see on this diagram, those are normal nerve cells, whereas if you look on the right-hand side, these are stressed neurons, and they're not doing very well. So the goal then is how to maintain your brain in a healthy condition, prevent having these terrible diseases which exist, and we do believe that meditation can have a very positive effect on the brain. Thank you very much.
දැන් මේ ස්ලයිඩ් එක බැලුවොතින් අත් වශයෙන් අපේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ ඔක්කොම ෆැකල්ටිස් වලට එක එක විදිහේ භාවනා තියෙනවා. එහිම අපේ කේමා මෙහිණින් වහන්සේ එකක් මේක ගැන කිව්වා. එතකොට මේ වගේ ගොඩාක් දේවල් අපිට මේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ අපිට කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒත් අපි ඔක්කොම ෆැකල්ටිස් මෙහි තියෙන නිසා. ඒක තමයි අපේ මූලික වර්ල්ඩ් ක්ලාස් යුනිවර්සිටි එකේ පරමාර්ථය. මේ වගේ බෞද්ධ දර්ශනයක්, වෛද්‍ය විද්‍යාවත්, කළමනාකරණයත්, විද්‍යාපීඨයත් මේ ඔක්කොම එකහුව කරගෙන විශේෂයෙන්ම මම හිතන්නේ විචිත්‍රදම හාමුදුරුවෝ හදනවා MSc ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් එකක්. ඉතින් ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන්ුත් අපි ඉදිරියේ තව කටයුතු කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. දැන් අපිට ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් හෝ සිංහල භාෂාවෙන් ඕනෑම ප්‍රශ්න අපි වැඩ සිටින සංඝයා වහන්සේලාට කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම ප්‍රියනික අර්ථිකත් මෙහි කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්.
That area took space to expand by deploying brain cells, or does it work as a tumor or cancer?
Yes. I don't think it would work as a tumor or a cancer, because when there's a cancer, the cells are proliferating and they will just expand and kill your brain. So certainly what you're describing, you said the circle of Willis. So this is an effect of the endothelial cells in the brain blood circulation. So in this, it would be a different type of cell than the brain cell, because brain cells are neurons. So even though there is a modification, as you say, the brain is able to adapt for this. Even if there were some minor change, the brain would be able to accept this without undergoing severe problems.
At age 3, my hearing and sight is rather limited. So I want to ask a question that is personal to me. If the question has been already answered in what happened up to now, you will bear with me. I was interested in you were showing brain waves on meditation, brain waves on sleep. Now, as a person who has meditated for some time, about 30 years or 35, I have experienced that sometimes in meditation, when you're on the meditation wave, all of a sudden you go into the sleep wave. And is there any connection between the two waves? It's a transfer development. Is there a way of controlling the transfer from the one wave to the other?
Well, you see, the difference in the state of meditation, the brain waves and sleep waves are very close. They have a very close frequency. So if you are meditating, for example, and you're lying down, you will rapidly reach the sleep state. So that's why it is recommended, if possible, to sit up so you do not fall asleep. This is a very simple explanation. So if you can, stand up, sit up, but don't lie down, because you'll go into that delta brainwave state.
Honorable Mahasangha, Chairman of the academics and my dear friends, it is a very good opportunity for us to questions. I think the second question actually, already people have answered to this second question partly. Meditation helps to prevent illnesses. Yes, there are randomized controlled trials has done that prevents depression. Firstly, and I also studied in preventing suicide. Yes, it happens. But we don't know. The question is whether does development of certain brain areas. That's a question actually you also asked. And you rightly mentioned that there are two types of meditation. One is concentration meditation, that's what you mean. The other thing is awareness meditation. And my colleague, when I did my PhD, studied concentration meditation, that's a loving kindness, and I do not know the results of yet on preventing depression. But I studied mindfulness meditation that helps in preventing suicide. So anyway, it is very complex. What we need to understand here is that there are two kinds of meditation. And meditation, not only the cognitive, but also it starts actually in India. Yoga is also meditation. It's not the heart, brain only, it's heart also. So it's very complex. So Western concepts of meditation is different to that of the original concept. That's what we need to understand. Secondly, one of the controversies in your point is that you have shown that very nicely about the development of some certain part of brain is associated with certain kind of memorizing or remembering. Yes. However, that may be, I think, as you said, it's a concentration which leads to development. It may not in other meditation practices, like two different meditation practices for certain brain effects. Perhaps yes, I don't know. And thirdly, how long does it take before meditation for significant brain? So we are going on a very, very scientific sort of measuring devices. I don't think we can answer to this question because it depends on personalities, it's very complex, and we cannot actually rectify coming to the two standard deviation, that area, questions like this. That's my opinion.
And I also have to ask a question from you. This is not my own question, and I got it from the audience, which is written in Sinhala. Maitri Bhavana, when we are doing the meditation of the loving and kindness, itamat alankara darshana Buddharajan Mahanse Ruva Aloka Dharakare Visuma Hetu. Because it says that when we are doing the meditation of loving and kindness, the Lord Buddha could be able to perceive the beautiful sceneries and flashes according to the meditation. So the question asks, what are the significant reasons to arise of these lights and beautiful sceneries to his mind? The loving, I could get it, okay. Meditation of loving and kindness. Meditation of loving and kindness. Because the Lord Buddha could do that meditation. After that, he could feel, actually perceive beautiful sceneries. Thank you, Professor Anil. Gaurani Ma Sanghatning Avasai, colleagues and friends, I know mind is very much important, but you cannot find where your mind is located in your body. According to the Western medical system, if the kidney is not good, definitely you can change it. If the heart is not good enough, that is also possible. If your eyesight is not good, there are so many methods to get changes. But if your mind is not good, then you have to clean up your mind on your own. So there is no shortcuts. You cannot find shortcuts. So mind is so much powerful. So I don't want to take much time. I believe that Professor Anil, thank you very much for organizing this type of wonderful, discussions. You are educating the academia and the general public as well. So as the Vice Chancellor, I must thank you. So thank you very much.
I'd like to ask a simple question from Professor Cato, because I couldn't hear some of the things you told. I'm so sorry, I couldn't hear some of the things you told. It's a simple question. I got the impression now you said that stress shrinks brain network. Now also I got the impression that meditation improves the size of the brain. Is it the size of the actual neurons, or if they are a multiplication of neurons, or if they are also a change in the transmitters?
So we do not know. When we talk about the size of the brain being larger. Now, because of the techniques we're using, we don't know if there are more neurons or there are more synaptic connections between the neurons. So that's something that will certainly have to be done. But using or magnetic resonance, we cannot go to the cellular level. So either this volume is more neurons, or it could be due to more connections.
So thank you very much, and let me thank the Venerable Manga for coming for this, and the Venerable Kema, and of course I'll thank our Vice Chancellor for helping and guiding us to formulate this workshop, and Professor Kato from Professor Anne Kato and Professor Gabo Kato from Switzerland coming all the way and sharing their experience, and especially for everybody who have come all this way to listen to it. And I would like to thank the people who are behind the scene, the World Class University project, and my staff like Darshi, Nalaga Lakmar, Pradeep, Titumini, and Nadika, all these people for what they have done. It's really, they're the one who really organized this. So let me thank everybody and for everybody for participating in this. And we would like to conclude now, and we'll be progressing from there onwards. Thank you very much.